if let's say then that there is a depression, that the economy has to go back onto the gold standard, how would that affect the ordinary person, the person with a mortgage who maybe worked many years, who's got a bit of savings? Are they going to see their wealth wiped out? How do you think it would affect the ordinary person in the street?
Well, a lot of people with savings, have seen their savings wiped out already by not being on the gold standard. So it's been if you were saving money, if you look at people now, maybe 80 who had a nest egg when they were 65, they've seen the spending power, the purchasing power of that probably disappear by at least two-thirds, probably more. So the people who get hit by the degradation, inflation of money are old age pensioners, people on fixed incomes, people on minimum wages, and people with savings. They've been murdered. So there is no easy way out of this. We're not going to find an easy way out of this because we've been living beyond our means. We've been living on tick now for 2 generations. There is no way out of this, but there is a possibility. There's light at the end of the tunnel if we had a government like Warren Harding and Calvin Coolidge who would say, we have got to absolutely get rid of public. We've got to reduce government spending by 75%, enormous. We've got to get rid of unnecessary regulations. We've got to make it easy for people, the entrepreneur, to start a business from scratch without being burdened with lots and lots of regulations, and rejig the economy that way. And that's the only way we're going to pull out of it. The state is the problem. The state is not the solution. The state is the problem. The state's been the problem, and central banks and bankers have been the problem now since I was born.
As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based. And I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I want to come on to that on the last question, really, about how to fix the problems. Would you like to say something about the stock market? Because I have a very jaundiced view about the stock market since I got wiped out in 2001. I was very interested in I was watching a video recently about the crash in 2008 and how Goldman Sachs were very much manipulating what went on there. And I very well remember British Telecom shares went up, I think they were 11 quid. And Goldman Sachs said, oh, they're undervalued. They're going to go up to 15 quid. So I bought quite a lot. And then, of course, the following week, they all declined. And now I think they're about £2.50 on a good day. So my view is that the whole of the stock market is a big racket run by the big people at the top who fleece the unsuspecting when they feel that the time is right to do it. One of the things that I've seen recently regarding the stock market is that although a lot of money has been pumped into companies in America under the these moves that Trump is trying to do to stabilize the economy, a lot of it has gone to the really big companies who are using it to buy shares. And of course, the really big companies like Amazon and Google and these really big players, they're very stable because they've got millions or billions in the bank. They can outride this crisis. But the smaller companies, and we've seen this in America, I know it's slightly different in America regarding filing for bankruptcy, and it's something that companies do in order to survive. But a lot of companies, and I saw some big names like Pizza Hut and Hertz that actually filed for bankruptcy because they are companies that depend upon a daily, weekly cash flow in order to keep going. So I suppose my question is, what's your view on the stock market? Because it seems to be buoyant at the moment. And I'm sorry, but I'm very much a cynic about this. And all that tells me is the people who really control it are getting ready to fleece all the mugs who put their money in at the moment. Am I too cynical? What's your view on the stock market?
Well, I manage bonds, of course, not stocks, fixed interest. But the point is, your real inflation, your problem overvalued is the bond market at the moment. Let's talk about the bond market. So there are bonds on the market, which is artificial money is flooding into bonds. which are paying either 0 or 1%, and Swiss and German bonds are paying negative interest rates.
Yeah.
So we are due for a massive crash in the bond market, and bond markets will crash the stock market, and because the inflation, monetary inflation, which we have at the moment, creates asset price inflation, and that inflation, that monetary inflation, is going into assets via the banks. So this is the problem that we have. So yes, there must be a stock market crash. There always is boom and bust in stock markets and bond markets, and we're overdue for another one, because this is how the system works. So certainly, if Goldman Sachs ever tell you to do something, do the opposite.
Yeah, I know
Goldman Sachs are all crooks. They're known in the city. We knew them, and I worked for an investment bank, which was pretty sharp, the SG Warburg Empire, pretty damn sharp operators. But the Goldman Sachs were known as the vampire squid. They have a hand, or a tentacle, rather, in every pocket. They fiddled the Greek figures for the Greeks to join the euro. They lobotomize and corrupt everybody who works for them. Ricky Tikki Tavi, incidentally, is one. And Goldman Sachs were telling you that gold wouldn't go above $1,200 2 years ago in order to fill their own boots with it, because I didn't take any notice of them at all. But you have these dodgy banks, and how do they get away with it? Well, they pick up failed politicians. So they pick up people like, not Goldman Sachs, but George Osborne at £500,000 a year. What did he do to get that? They pick up the Barroso, works for Goldman Sachs, and Brown works for Morgan Stanley or Morgan Grenfell, I can't remember. But all these chancellors, when they finish their term, go and work for an investment bank on monster salaries. So they all piss in the same pot, Gerard. They're all crooks. They're all vagabonds.
Yeah, not only that, they've the big businesses corrupted academia as well, because a lot of these economists with universities are also on the payroll doing consultancy for the big banks. So you can't trust what they say either, I don't think, even if you can understand it.
Don't forget, you've got to bear in mind, if you look at the strategic aspect, all big businesses hate small businesses.
Yeah.
Small businesses.
Well, enough in the European Parliament, didn't we?
Yeah, and small business, self-employed people and small businesses account for something like over 70% of the economy of the United Kingdom. So consequently, politicians find them difficult to manipulate because they're small. They can't get at them. And they don't like it. Politicians and big business don't like people they can't control. And the best way of controlling things is big business and politicians and banks in cahoots with each other, which is fascism. And I don't use that as a pejorative term. That is a political system. It's big business, banks and politicians in cahoots. And that's what we actually have at the moment. And high regulation. Big business loves regulation. Big business loves regulation. Don't forget, big business can afford a human resource department full of very highly paid professionals. If you're running a 10-man business down the road in East Yorkshire, you can't afford that kind of expertise. So consequently, there's a problem, and that's got to wash away. We've got to get rid of all this.
Well, I think it was Mussolini that said, really, fascism should be called corporatism because it's an alliance of political power with big business. And just for the benefit of the viewer to this, while we were in the European Parliament, what we saw all the time was legislation coming through that benefited big business because they could comply with it, because they had the means of complying with it, but actually made life harder all the time for small and medium-sized businesses, because it was another thing, another burden on their back that had to contend with. And this was a message I was constantly trying to get through during my 15 years as an MEP, that the European Union is actually anti, as you've just made the point, anti the small and medium-sized businesses. And yet they're the backbone of the economy, because I think they employ 90%, something of that region, of people who actually work, who are employed by a small or medium-sized business. And of course, for most youngsters, it's how they get their first step on the work ladder. As I did, nearly 50 years ago, you get a low-paid, menial job, but it allows you to work, it allows you to earn, it allows you to get that next job on the ladder. And what we're seeing now is kids who can't work, who can't get a decent job, and even the kids with university degrees can't get jobs. And once they're getting past about 25 and they haven't had a steady job, they're becoming unemployable. And I think that's an absolute shocking disgrace and a crime against humanity, quite frankly.
You're quite right, Joe, which is why at the Brexit referendum, you couldn't find a single small or medium-sized business who was doing anything other than vote for Brexit unless they had a lot of their business was going to the continent. And of course, they were very few. Yeah. Most people don't sell anything to the continent because they don't buy anything of ours. Yeah. So it's very small. So your butcher, your baker, your sparky, your candlestick maker, all people in small business voted to leave because they were the ones that are being screwed by EU regulation. And that's how we did it. It wasn't every single civil servant voted remain. Yeah. Big business wanted to remain. The banks wanted to vote remain. It was the ordinary little guys that voted for leave. But as you say, paradoxically, ironically, the backbone of the economy, which still to this day is something which, how can it possibly be right to have the same employment legislation for Tesco and the shop on the corner? How can that conceivably be right?
Yeah. As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based. And I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So surprise won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.
It's quite a mysterious thing when you try to pin down what it's a bit like time. For the physicist, it's a bit of a mystery when you try to explain it, because we all knew what money was 500 years ago when it was gold and silver coins, but again, then we moved into paper money, and of course now money is just numbers on a computer. You don't even have to print the stuff. I think I saw a figure that the amount of notes and coins in circulation is only about 3% of the total amount of money that exists, because most of it is just a number on a computer, which brings me on to something that people often talk to me about, or they did when I was an MEP, this idea of sound money. What is sound money? How would you create it? And I think you mentioned this already about going back onto the gold standard. Would you like to say something about that? What your views are on that?
Well, money, first of all, what we need to do is we need to define what money is. Money is a medium of exchange in which people will exchange goods or services. So people would exchange goods or services for what they perceive to be money. And if you go back far enough, you go back 6,000 years, it was salt. But for the last 5,000 years, it's been gold. It's when people have the confidence to accept it, it's a store of wealth. So if you put away gold coins now, for example, in 5 years' time, those gold coins will buy you what they will buy you today. Gold isn't in an investment. Gold isn't an investment, gold is money. And JP Morgan said in 1926, only gold is money. And when a dollar bill or a pound bill or a franc, the gold franc, a piece of paper says, yes, we've got the gold, it's in storage, it's at the bank. And as soon as you stop doing that, all you've got is an intrinsically worthless piece of paper. And of course, we saw that in the Weimar Republic when it was just paper, it had no intrinsic value. And we saw that most recently, of course, we've seen it in Zimbabwe and the Lebanon. It's just printed paper. It's meaningless. It doesn't buy anything. And Argentina had the same problem with the peso. So money is what you will exchange. And if we go on degrading money, when you go into your pub for your pint, your landlord will say, no, I don't want a £10 note for that now, or a £20 note. I don't want that. That's no good to me. I know you've got some eggs, Godfrey, you keep your own chickens. Can I have a couple of dozen eggs? Or you've got a nice watch. I tell you what, can I have your watch and I'll pour you free beer for the rest of the week, or something like that. We'll go back to barter. But of course, with the gold, if you have a gold coin, let's take I have a 1905 gold sovereign, 1905. That gold sovereign, which was the equivalent of a pound coin in 1905, will buy you today what it bought in 1905, which is beg breakfast and an evening meal and a bottle of plonk. It'll buy you today, because it's a sovereign this morning is about 380 quid. So that's it's money. That's money. Paper isn't money. When people stop accepting it for goods and services, it ceases to become money, and only gold is money, or maybe silver. So consequently, there's only one way to go, and that's downhill.
As most of you know, my work is very heavily independently research based, and I get my information from all over the world. It would help if you press the subscribe button and the little bell next to it, because the more subscribers I have, the more likely it is that international independent research institutes will share their material with me. It's most helpful, and then of course I automatically share it with you. So, surprise, won't cost you anything. Thank you very much.
We will make America great again.